So a number of years ago, I read this book, not 2 or 3 years ago, and I've talked about it before, but in the book, the author talks about this thing called a misogi. So if you remember this at all, but a misogi it originates in like Shinto, Japan, where it's a purification kind of rite, a ritual where you might go into like a freezing stream or into like really cold ocean kind of a situation. The idea is you go in one way, and that process of enduring some kind of distress changes you. It purifies your heart, right? So we here in the West have taken this idea of misogi and have made it into basically a challenge where a person is either emotionally or physically or mentally stretched, right? So in the book and other places, there are some examples. The author, for one example, he and I think 4 other friends, they took this massively heavy rock and they were in the Pacific Ocean, and they carried it on the ocean floor for 5 miles, right? They would take turns diving down and like walking on the ocean floor with this rock and then go up, and the next day I would dive down. They wanted to go 5 miles underwater with a rock. That was their misogi. Other examples are like any kind of extreme athletic event, or like running a marathon or ultra marathon or hiking some like massive mountain peak. I've heard of people's misogis being something along the lines of like a digital detox that for 48 hours, 72 hours, however long it is, just like there's no online anything, no media whatsoever. That kind of idea could be a big challenge for somebody. Others might say, cold plunge, or even like a cold shower every day for a week, that kind of situation. Something that challenges even something simple, like a solo wilderness overnight. So where you don't bring a lot of gear, but just try to endure the discomfort for one night. Or someone might say, I'm gonna walk 20 miles this Saturday, and walk 30 miles this Saturday. Whatever the thing is, it could be fasting. But for like a classic misogi, classic being it's 30 years old basically, but classic misogi has 2 rules. And the 2 rules are, you have to have only a 50% chance of success. And the second rule is, don't die, right? So it's a challenge, and actually the risk of failure is very, very high, but you can't die in the process of it. Now that's from the book, a book called The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. And the thesis of that book, The Comfort Crisis, is this, that we have kind of a modern obsession with convenience and comfort that has actually hurt us. That our obsession with convenience and comfort has made us weaker, less resilient, actually less happy and unfulfilled. And so he cites a number of issues. For example, he says, here we are living in virtually constant climate control, where we spend almost year-round in 72 degrees. And because of that, apparently, it wrecks our body's adaptability and our ability to even burn calories effectively. Not only that, but another example he gives is that we have such easy access to hyper-processed foods they're really, really tasty and really calorically dense. In addition to the fact that we have the rise of automated movement, so like cars and elevators and escalators and apps that bring whatever we want to us, that what happens as a result is over 80% of American adults are not moving enough. That the average number of steps an American adult gets in is like 4,800, which is half what the rest of the world gets. Not only that, we are eating roughly 500 calories more per day than we did back in 1970. And as a result of that convenience, right? As a result of that comfort, we have record obesity and we have record chronic illnesses that are afflicting us. And we just think it's normal. Another thing he pointed out, he had a great quote in the book, and the quote is this. He said, finally, on June 29th, 2007, boredom was pronounced dead thanks to the iPhone. Because that's when the iPhone was released. And he said, boredom, we don't experience boredom anymore, right? Because we want to be comfortable, we want to scroll, we have endless entertainment, we have endless streaming. We fill every moment with scrolling and with noise. And just think about this. What does that do to us? Well, it robs us of boredom. And one of the things that the researchers have shown is that boredom is essential for creativity. Boredom is essential for problem solving. Boredom is essential for self-reflection. In fact, studies have shown that people who can't tolerate boredom are more prone to anxiety, more prone to impulsive behavior, and they exhibit poor decision making, just because we're not bored. And the last example he might give is right now we're in this place where we're so obsessed with comfort that we have no real risk, we have no real challenges. In fact, there's research that highlights and underscores the fact that a lack of childhood outdoor play and risk-taking gives rise to increased adult anxiety. That when people don't face challenges early on in their lives, they become less confident and more fearful later on in their lives. And this whole thing, this whole notion, this is so pervasive, this captivity to comfort, that a man named Matthew Chandler, he once said this, he once made this big statement. When I heard it, I just was so captivated by it. The statement is this, that comfort is the God of our generation. That comfort is the God of our generation. And I've shared that idea with so many people in the last number of weeks. And the number of people who have kind of affirmed it seem to indicate that it's clear. Most of their affirmations are this. I say, comfort is the God of our generation. And people are like, and it's just kind of this grunt. And why? Because so many of us, we could say our lives are defined by, well, I just want to be comfortable, right? How many of us are just like, I just want to be comfortable, in that sense of we're bothered by each inconvenience. Well, this is taking so long. Like a microwave oven, it's taking so long. Or the delivery is taking so long. Or even the idea of, oh, I'm freezing when we're just mildly chilled. Or I'm just starving when the last meal we had was 4 hours ago. In fact, I remember one of my older sisters, when her kids would ever say, whenever they would say, I'm starving, she would say, wait, when did you last eat? Well, I last ate either last night or I last ate this morning. And she would just be matter of fact. She'd say, in that case, you're hungry, you're not starving. Get over it. Because there's this reality, of course, that we just have that thing that says, I just want to be comfortable. And so much of our lives is this desire to escape. I mean, when was the last time we spent any time in silence rather than just, I'll put something on quick, put something in my ears, put something in front of me, just something in the background. And we're just desiring to, I always think about this whenever we're in the midst of a line or in the midst of any kind of place and the desire to pull out our phones. What I'm saying is this, I no longer want to be here. I no longer want to be in this world. I'm going to escape to another one. And that refrain, I just want to be comfortable. It's not just about now. For so many people, that's become our goal for life. I just want to be comfortable later on. I'm going to do this so later on I can be comfortable. I'm going to live this way, get this kind of job, I'm going to live this kind of certain way so that I can have a comfortable life. And paradoxically, this is the crazy thing that Michael Easter points out. Paradoxically, because of so much comfort, we now experience these negative effects and we end up underliving our lives. Because comfort has become the God of our generation. And what the result is, virtually all of us who are captive to comfort end up underliving our lives. And of course, this is nothing new. I mean, again, this is the God of our generation, but it's happened many generations. In fact, look at the first reading today from the prophet Amos. What is he describing? He's describing people in Judah and people in Israel. And I love how he describes them because it's very, very close to how we live. He says, woe to the complacent in Zion. They're lying upon beds of ivory, stretched comfortably on their couches, right? They're not just lying on beds of wood, straw, beds of ivory, stretched out on their couches. We can imagine ourselves just like flopping down and just kind of putting ourselves out. They eat lambs from the flock, calves from the stall. And again, you're eating veal, you're eating the tenderest of meats. The improvised music of the harp, so jazz, which is a great sign of comfort. He says, they drink wine from bowls. Now, you might have just heard that and thought, oh yeah, wine from bowls. No, you're drinking wine out of bowls? What's wrong with you? It's not just out of a glass. This is out of the biggest vessel we have. And they anoint themselves, not just with oil, they anoint themselves with the best of oil. So it seems like, even if comfort is the God of our generation, that desire has been around for a really long time. And here's the question, where does that come from? Because we know this. We know that comfort's not bad. Comfort's a good thing. I'd say with this, it comes from the garden. Here's what I mean. I've said this many, many times, that when God made us and put us in the garden, everything's good, right? And God in the garden, he makes us for at least three things. He makes us for love, he makes us for labor, he makes us for leisure. So here's leisure that is connected to comfort. But because of the fall, we've taken these good things, love and labor and leisure, and they become twisted. And so our experience of all three of these things is often distorted. So with love, we go to one or two extremes. Either we have this desire to use each other, even though we're made to love each other, we desire to use each other, or to be indifferent to each other. Either I can't use you enough, or I don't care about you at all. When it comes to labor, we're tempted to either see labor as toil, it's just simply drudgery, or it's our identity. It's everything we are. And when it comes to leisure, the same thing is true. We vacillate, we bounce back and forth between, here's leisure for us, right? And now in our day and age, leisure is either collapse, you got a day off, just fall face down on the couch, collapse, Or leisure for us is I can't stop. I can't stop scrolling. I have a break, so I can't stop eating. I can't stop drinking. I can't stop streaming. I can't stop binging. Whatever that thing is, that has been our experience. I have a break, and I can't stop. Remember, when we say that comfort is the God of our generation, that means it's an idol. Keep this in mind. Idols, we rarely make idols out of bad things. We almost always take something that's good and make it an ultimate thing. That's what an idol is. Taking a good thing and making it into an ultimate thing. We make it into the thing that we love the most. Or we make it into the thing that we serve the most. We make it into the thing that we build our lives around. And how many of us have built our lives around this idea? I just want to be comfortable. We can know that comfort's become the God of our generation if it's one of the things that we fear losing the most. If we look in our hearts, we can see that that's one of the reasons why comfort has become the God of our generation. Again, remember that comfort is a good thing. We don't demonize comfort. Because we know this, we know that deprivation can often lead to desperation in so many of us. So again, it's not like discomfort's the best thing ever. Deprivation can often lead to desperation. In fact, I remember hearing a story, a historian was talking about the Great Depression and how actually devastating the Great Depression was. He said, we can hardly understand what that did to the American psyche, having so little and being in such constant discomfort and such constant deprivation leading to desperation. He actually talked about this. He said, he talked to his dad, his father, who had joined the army for World War II in the Air Force. He was a bombardier. And he asked his father, he said, how could you take, it's called Benzodrine, which is to help them keep awake for these 16-hour bombing runs. They have to stay awake somehow. How could you take that on a regular basis? And then sleeping pills to fall asleep when you got back home. And then when you had a sinus infection, he said you had to go up 30,000 feet and your eardrums blew out. And then they told you when you're flying, not even to wear parachutes, because if you get over to Japan and you crash, they're going to execute you and behead you. And he said, well, compared to the Depression, it wasn't that bad. And he said it was the first time in his life he ever had steak and ice cream. So I'm not saying that deprivation is the best. It isn't. Deprivation can often lead to desperation. We know that sometimes we can do the worst things when we're deprived of something. Deprivation can lead to desperation, but also we know this comfort can often lead to complacency. And it's one of the reasons why in Proverbs chapter 30, there's this incredibly beautiful and poignant proverb for us today. It says this, it's a prayer. And it says, keep deception and lies far from me. Oh God, give me neither poverty nor riches. Right? Give me neither comfort nor deprivation. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who's the Lord? That's comfort leading to complacency. Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my Lord. That's deprivation leading to desperation. And yet, what are we made to live? In neither place. We're actually made to live a full life. And yet we end up underliving our lives. So we go back to what Michael Easter said. He called it toughening. Now, this is the thing. He says this. This is this theoretical idea that being completely overwhelmed by negative, stressful things isn't good. Great, got it. But it also theorized that being totally sheltered isn't optimal either. That there should be some amount of stress that gives you optimal psychological and physical well-being. And actually, there was a research that was done in Stanford with these squirrel monkeys. What they did with these squirrel monkeys, a group of them, is every 10 weeks, every 1 week out of every 10 weeks as they were being raised, they removed them from their families and they had to live on their own. And after 1 week, they reintroduced them back to their families and keep going on as they were raised. It said when these monkeys grew up, they were significantly more resilient and capable in the real world than their sheltered siblings. When they grew up, they were the leaders, they were the doers. And that's what we're called to be. Yet, if we underlive our life, even more importantly, if comfort is our God, then we end up missing God. In fact, we end up missing on God's will in our lives because that's the goal. The goal isn't being uncomfortable. The goal of our lives is God. The goal of our lives is God's will. The obstacle is that we're living in captivity to comfort. The obstacle is that we're unwilling to be uncomfortable. And so this whole message right now, this is not, hey, we're going to go out there and we're going to pursue discomfort. That's not what it is. The message is this: we need to be willing to pursue God's will and have absolutely no fear of discomfort. Because why? Because if we're bound by a love of comfort, we'll never be able to love anything else. This is the truth. If we're bound by a love of comfort, we will never be able to love anything else. Because we all know this, ever since the fall, when all that love and labor and leisure, all that broke, you know what, since then, we're still made to love, but love always involves sacrifice. This is the goal of life. The goal of life is to love with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, the Lord God, to love our neighbor as ourselves. And yet, if I love comfort, I'll never be able to love, because love always involves sacrifice. One thing we have to know, though, of course, is this love we're called to, it's not arbitrary. Like the discomfort, the sacrifice that is connected to love, it's actually intrinsic. What I mean by that is there was this movie back in the day with Matthew Broderick and Meg Ryan, I think, and it was this like kind of dark comedy situation where Matthew Broderick's character was in love with Meg Ryan and she was trying to get away from him, but he was just obsessed with her. And at one point, I remember this scene, and it just has burned in my brain. I've thought about it maybe once every month for the rest of my life since I saw it in high school. And it's Matthew Broderick, and he's sitting at this table trying to convince Meg Ryan's character that he loves her so much. And he says, "How much do I love you?" He says, "Do I love you enough to break my own finger?" And they're at this dinner table and he just like breaks his finger. He's like, "Oh, that's love." And I remember thinking, that's crazy, that's nuts. And I remember thinking, wait, what's the difference between that and the cross? Because we say like, well, here's God proves his love for us here in dying on the cross. Like, what's the difference? And the difference is this: what Matthew Broderick's character did was arbitrary. I'm going to prove my love for you by suffering unnecessarily. The cross is intrinsic. The love and sacrifice connected in the cross is what? Jesus didn't pursue the cross. He pursued us. And the way he had to love us was through that road of the cross. I was talking to a young woman recently, and she shared that both of her parents are very ill. And she said, you know, some days it's really easy to just avoid going over to their house. Some days it's just really easy to just stay away because I know it cost me something. She says, some days I'm really inclined to be captive by comfort. But she says, but I know this. I know whenever I go over there, just to be with my parents and be with them in their sickness, it's always better than if I avoid it. And to put to death that God of comfort and replace it with real love, even though it's uncomfortable, it's always worth it. Because oftentimes comfort leads to complacency, and the people that we should be loving, we're not able to. Look at the gospel today. Here's the rich man and Lazarus, and this Lazarus is right in front of the rich man, but because he is captive to his comfort, he doesn't even notice. He doesn't even see him, doesn't even do anything. So this is the last thing. So here's the question. If comfort is the God of our generation, then what do we do with this? And I'd say this: we do what Christians have done for generations. In fact, St. Paul writes it to Timothy today. St. Paul writing to Timothy, he says this, he says, okay, compete well for the faith. He doesn't say glide into heaven. He says, compete well for the faith. Lay hold of eternal life to which you were called when you made that noble confession in the presence of many witnesses. Basically, if we have a false God, we do what every generation has done. We put that false God to death. In fact, there's this term we use in Catholic circles called mortification. Mortification comes from that word in Spanish, like morir, to die. When we do mortifications, we're putting something to death. And sometimes we're putting our fear to death. Sometimes we're putting our self-love to death. In this case, we're putting our idol of comfort to death. So what do? Well, you could call them misogis if you want to. We can call them mortifications. Where on a daily basis, weekly basis, we can say, okay, What's a small way that I can choose this active mortification of something like, here's a fast. Maybe it's from food, maybe it's from drink, maybe it's from media, maybe it's from screens, maybe it is cold showers. And to be able to say, okay, each day, or regularly at least, I'm going to choose some kind of active mortification. And in doing that, what I'm going to do is this. I am not pursuing discomfort. I'm pursuing God's will. And I'm demonstrating that the fear of discomfort has no place in my life. Or even this, not only active mortifications, but another thing called passive mortifications, which basically are the inconveniences that come to us. To be able to see that person got in our way, like, okay, Lord, I accept that. Inconvenient, no problem. Okay, it's hotter than I like. All right, no problem. It's colder than I like. Okay, no problem. This is a farther walk than I was prepared for. No problem. It's that inconvenience that comes our way that hopefully wakes us up from complacency and helps us not only remember that God is God, that people are around us that He's called us to love, and that we are called to not underlive our lives. The invitation is to refuse to dread discomfort and to pursue God's will with no fear of difficulty. I think it's true that comfort has become the God of our generation. That we don't have to worship that God. Our goal is God Himself. And we're called to escape captivity to comfort. And to no longer fear and no longer dread discomfort.